You know, what's fascinating to me in many ways about your company and the sort of flexibility that you're trying to provide companies in this moment is not only do you have an insight into where people's workers are operating from and where, but also personally, because I've read post-pandemic, 2/3 of your workforce have actually been hired post. I mean, that's huge, and it also gives our viewers a sense of how you're scaling up as well. What does the workforce look like now, and particularly in light of the hiring that you've been doing in very recent times? How are those conversations being had, and what do people want?
It's a great question, and I think the one thing that people want more than anything else is flexibility. We did a bunch of research with a group called Future Forum. 79% of people want flexibility in where they work, but 94%, and this is second only to compensation, 94% want flexibility in when they work. And I think the ability to move some of the synchronous work, so work that's happening with multiple people at the same time, like a meeting, to asynchronous means is incredibly important. And when we have that alternative, it gives people an enormous amount of flexibility. It gives employers more flexibility to hire in a wider geographic area. And yeah, you mentioned that 2/3 of our workforce is hired post-pandemic. At this point, for most companies, it's going to be 20%, 30%, 50%. You know, we've been in this state for 2.25 years, and the employers who choose to cast a wider net in where they're hiring, I think, are at a huge advantage. The employees' demand for flexibility can only really be met by employers who are willing to have a little bit of an open mind. I mean, there's still a pretty large contingent of people who have this belief that at some point soon, 90 days from now, at any given point, we're going to go back to exactly the way things were, and that plainly is never going to happen.
Oh, there was a lot in there. I'm trying to decide what I ask you next. You mentioned something really important, I think, which is that you're hiring in places where you don't even have offices. And this is a crucial part of that. Is it making it easier to hire? Is it making it cheaper to hire, particularly in, as we look around the world, super tight labour market conditions?
It is super tight labour market. So no, it's not about cost savings. It is really about widening the net. We've been through a decade plus of very, very difficult competition for hiring technology workers. And regardless of what happens in the macro environment, I don't see that changing just because technology is becoming a bigger component of healthcare, of financial services, of retail. So everyone is hiring technology workers. The realization that we had maybe in the summer of 2020 was, we're hiring all these people in places where you don't have offices. We're telling employees who live in New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, London, Toronto, Vancouver, places where we have offices, that they're allowed to move. Many of them moved hours away, or in some cases much further, in order to get a bigger home, to be closer to family, or whatever their needs were. We can't ask them to come back. So the idea that people are going to be in the office for 2 days a week doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you're really going to constrain the potential pool of employees to those which live within a commuting distance of one of your offices. And that would be foolish.